college town, on a college campus, where you are immersed in that culture, that results in a radical transformation much of the time. See, and I think people on the right tend to get this wrong because they talk about kids being radicalized by leftist professors. But if some teacher tried to tell me how to vote, that would make me want to vote the opposite way. And this is why they cannot reverse this process just by starting a bunch of conservative colleges. It doesn't work like that. This person described it as learning a million social cues to avoid betraying your poverty. But it's not so much about learning to perform as a higher economic class, but as a different social class. A class in which it is assumed that you are to some degree cosmopolitan, that you have some knowledge of the world and other cultures. So in my case, I grew up in a tiny town in the Midwest, and in my high school, I think it was 97% white students. I didn't have a single classmate that was openly gay or trans, and the key word there is openly. So you go from that environment, this stereotypical small town where everybody knows everybody else. Like if you were a kid and tried to use a fake ID to buy alcohol, the person working the counter knows you and knows your dad. You go off to university and the very next day, I'm suddenly in a classroom with people from all over the planet. The very first class project I ever had to do, the first week I was there, I got partnered up with a Japanese girl who really didn't speak the language. The guy sitting on the opposite side of me was the son of a famous journalist in New York. If you didn't grow up in a small town or in like an isolated suburb, it's impossible to explain the impact this had. It was like the cantina scene in Star Wars, like I was suddenly sharing a space with all of these aliens. This was the first time I had ever met rich kids. We didn't have those where I came from. I met hippies and aspiring rappers and poets and artists. I met Buddhists and pagans and communists. I became good friends with people with disabilities and mental illnesses. I sat in a classroom with a guy who went on to play in the NFL and with a girl who went on to become a famous actress. All of us sharing this same space, living in the same student housing, eating at the same restaurants. And over again, I was embarrassing myself because of my sheltered background, because I hadn't been anywhere or done anything. None of it felt like I was being programmed or socialized. It just felt like I was being exposed to the fact that there's a whole world out there. To be clear, the stuff I actually learned in the classroom, I probably could have absorbed in 1 6-month stretch of intensive learning at home. But that wasn't what I got out of it. The ability to do what you often have to do in modern society, which is move to a city and work in a diverse environment, that is what many of us learned by going away to college. Because there's a reason why statistically most good jobs are still hiding behind college degrees. And it's not just because of the stuff you learn in the classroom.
So this has to do with my video on field slaves and house slaves, and how what they're really training you to do in college is be a house slave. So when in history would you ever experience being uprooted from everything you know and then suddenly being surrounded by foreigners in a strange city? If you were conquered and sold into slavery. And psychologically, your identity would scramble itself. You would start to feel constantly embarrassed. You'd be like, "Oh my God, my previous identity is insufficient, and I'm surrounded by all these people who could be hostile or might not be. I don't really know. They're acting like I need to act a certain way. Like there's things that I'm not understanding." And then your identity just blanks. You'll just accept anything at that point. You're like gay, trans, like 5 different genders, a million genders. It doesn't matter. You can be a giraffe. Like you're just your brain, because it's like, well, what if the slave master identifies as a giraffe? You're going to disagree with the slave master. He'll beat you within an inch of your life. And what he's saying is he didn't learn anything in college. The change that made him a Democrat did not happen because of what he learned in college. It happened because he was exposed to a social environment that destabilized his identity and made him uncertain in who he was. Like, oh my God, there's this big world out there that I know nothing about. It's like, you graduated high school. You should have a good understanding of the world. You should have an understanding of the world. You should have confidence in your understanding of the world. You should have confidence in the understanding of the world that landed you in the university with the other people who are now affecting your confidence in your understanding of the world. But you don't, because it's a survival response, because you're being conditioned to be a slave. And he goes on to say that the main benefit of going to college is that it conditions you to leave everything you've known and go to a strange city and work with people who aren't like you and you might not like, which is just slavery. That's just slavery. I mean, you might need your slaves to just go work with people they don't like in a place they've never been, with no regard to how that's going to make them feel. Because, like, screw you, they're your slaves. They're your property. Like, why would I get all up in my head about if my property my property has to do what I say, so I'm going to pre-select my property for the ability to not care about previous identity and to just shed identity in order to serve the higher good of whatever I want my slaves to do right now.
Indicators of how you will vote in the United States is whether or not you have a college degree. But this is not just a political divide, this is a cultural divide. The socialization that occurs when you go off to college is actually far more impactful than anything you learn in the classroom.
So again, to point out, he's not saying that what you learn in college is making you a Democrat because you now understand that they're correct. He's saying that his experience in college destabilized his identity to the point where he would accept anything, and that this experience is the strongest predictor of voting Democrat, which I say is the closest thing to the mental amalgamation of slavery. It's just mental slavery. It's like being a Democrat is being mentally a house slave. And I would challenge any Democrats to say an opinion that their master don't like. Go say something your master wouldn't like. Yes, April? Can I get you some water?